In this video, we're going to cover three different types of image registration. The first will be manually doing a rigid registration. The second will be an automatic registration. And then the third will be an automatic deformable registration. So in order to do a fusion within Eclipse, you need two image sets. Here we have our primary CT right here, and we're going to fuse it to this PET CT right here. So you can see this PET CT comes inside this orange dotted box, and if we click on that, that'll open up the fusion between our CT and our PET. So what that box what it means is that these images were imported with the same DICOM tags, so they're automatically fused. If we pull over our planning CT or our primary CT right here, how I like to start all of my registrations is I'll double click on that primary CT so that it is the CT that I have open, and then I will right click on whatever I want to fuse. So when fusing a PET CT, we want to fuse to the CT. So I'm going to right click on my CT, and you can see I have three options here: auto matching, manual matching, or point match. We'll go over point match in a future video, but right now I'm going to do a manual match. So I'll click there. And the reason I like to open up my planning CT first and right click on my secondary CT that I want to fuse is because it'll set this part up automatically. You don't have to worry about what your source image is or what your target image is. Your source image is actually the image you want to fuse to, so it's this one, the PET CT one. And then the target image is your primary CT, but if you don't want to mix those up, if you just start with your planning CT, right click on the one you want to fuse to, it'll be selected properly every time. Okay, so there's a few different options when you're doing a manual fusion. The first is if you just click anywhere inside of this red circle right here, you can drag your image around. And you can of course do that in all three planes. The second option is if you come outside of this red circle, you see our icon changes. And if you drag out here, you can rotate. So it's fairly simple. Those are your options, and you can rotate or drag your image around in any plane. And then work on your fusion. To save that fusion, you can do any number of things. One would be to click save. You could just click out and it'll automatically save this fusion. To open up this rigid fusion that we just did, you just double click on it and it opens that up. If you want to edit that fusion after the fact, we would just come up here and click manual match. It opens up our options again, and we can continue to make edits. If you want to delete a fusion, you can right click on this line, and we need to get out of the edit options. So right click and delete. Okay, the next option, which is the more popular option, would be this auto matching right here. So again, I have my planning CT or my primary CT open. I'm going to right click on the PET CT. This time I'm going to select auto matching. Again, it selects your images properly for you. Here we can see we have the same options as we did in the manual fusion, but we also have these auto matching tools up here. So it's really nice because you kind of get to do both. So I can manually start to line these up if I want to. And if I manually line them up and like my manual fusion, say I don't even want to do my auto fusion, I can simply hit close and I'm done. It saves my fusion. Again, if I want to go back and start editing I can click that auto again, and it'll bring up my my tools. So to use the auto matching portion, usually what I do is I will manually get my images pretty close to lined up how I want to. They look fairly close to me, and then you can use this this red region of interest box to tell the system where you're trying to fuse to. So obviously for a rigid fusion, you're not going to get a perfect match everywhere because the patient's going to be in different positions for both scans usually. So you gotta kind of be picky about where you want to fuse. So we'll put this region of interest box around our spine, try to get our spine to line up. Click start, and you can see it'll automatically line up that spine as best it can. So usually I'll do this a few times. That looks pretty close. Again, his chin position is very different, so we're never going to be perfect. But now is where you can start to hone in on the treatment area. So pretend we were going to treat somewhere around the larynx down here. Maybe I would focus more on that area specifically. And you can do this auto matching tool as many times as you want. So you can see the spine lines up fairly well right there. Soft tissue not so much because that different chin position. If I wanted to maybe just manually tweak this at the end, you certainly can do that. You can manually tweak, move your box, and then use your auto matching tool. Any combination that you want to do works. As soon as you're happy with that fusion, simply hit close, it'll save it, and you're done. The last option we're going to go over is this automatic deformable registration. So this tool only becomes available once you have a rigid registration. You need to have that rigid registration open. You can see here it grays out. Once we open that registration, this tool becomes available. So if we click on this, so for our rigid registration, we wanted to make this region of interest box small to focus on a specific area that we wanted to fuse. But for a deformable, we're going to do the opposite. You want to open that up as large as you want to cover all the area that you want to deform, basically. So we'll open it up pretty wide. Cover all of our normal tissue. We're going to try to exclude most of the CT couch and treatment couch if we can. We'll exclude the shoulders. We don't really need those to deform. Maybe something like this. Let's see what happens. Click start. And there we go. So a deformable registration within Eclipse is going to look like this, a squiggly line. We still have this rigid registration. So what the physician can do is they can use both when contouring. They can use this rigid, and they can come use this deformable. You can see if we open up our rigid, you know, the skulls are off, the spine's a little off, so everything's a little off. Open up this deformable and everything lines up much nicer. So when there's multiple nodes, lymph nodes that are lighting up in different areas, it'll usually be pretty hard to get all of them to line up, you know, with a rigid fusion. That's where deformable fusions really come in handy. You of course need to evaluate that deformable fusion, make sure it's valid and that it looks okay. There's a few tools over here that you can use. Here's the grid that gives you an idea of how that image was warped. There's this little kind of like a heat map with blue and green that you can use. There's this drop down menu gives you a bunch of other tools. I suggest reading up in the manual what all these tools mean and how to use them. But in general, I think the best way to evaluate a deformable registration is just to visually look at it, see if it makes sense. Make sure nothing looks too out of the ordinary before you give it to a physician. In the next video, we will go over the last option, which is this one, point match.